Hey everyone, this is Paul Jensen here for the Danker Family Fantasy Football Podcast, Week 2 recap. I had made an entire video last night after I got home from work, and just as I was about to upload it to YouTube, I realized that the sound was not working one bit. Now, I don't know what I did wrong, so hopefully by the end of this recording, the sound is working just perfectly fine, and I'll be able to put a video out. So I apologize for the delay. But moving forward, let's go ahead and get started. So I said a lot yesterday, and I'm not exactly sure how quick or how long I want this video to be. So I'll kind of rush through it a little bit, not go too much into detail as I would normally do. But just taking a quick look at the picks from this past week. Um, Ben Danker is still in first place, although uh, Nels Jensen, dad, he came up and really had a great week too, and now he's just right behind him for second place. So great job by dad there. He only missed two games all week. He missed the Bengals game and he missed the Texans game. Every other game he got right. So very impressive by NFL brilliance in the picks this week. But yeah, at the end of 2 weeks, it's Ben in first, Nelson second, and then myself and Uncle Tom are in third, with Maggie in fourth, and then everyone else kind of, you know, you see yourself there. Moving on to the standings real quick. After 2 weeks, we got two undefeated teams, one in each division. Carrie's undefeated in the East, Uncle Tom's undefeated in the West. Adrian, Nashville Packard, my dad, and Ben Danker are all tied for second at 1-1. And then poor Aunt Carol, she's 0-2, just like myself, who is last place in the West at 0-2. However, Uncle Tom, like I said, is undefeated. And then Garrett, Joan, my mom, and John are all tied at 1-1. Looking at the season stats, points for Uncle Tom has the most points through 2 weeks this season, although Adrian's performance this past weekend really jolted him up to second, with Aunt Carol being the only one not getting that 200 point mark yet. So Aunt Carol's got some work to do as far as getting some more points for her team. And then it's when it comes to points against, Carrie, being undefeated, she has the least points against. So Carrie's really having those very fortunate matchups so far to start the season. And then John Lopp, last place in points against, but he's still managed to win a game. So you're John Lopp's doing a lot better than uh, what his opponents are allowing him to be. So, so there you go. And then a couple of quick notes before I dive deep into the games from this past weekend. The team with the most points was Adrian by far. He had 100. If I actually, I'll go straight to the scoreboard just so that it's easier to see from week 2. But Adrian had the most points at 151.24. His entire team went off, and I did predict this. I said that Adrian would have a great week, and he did. So you're welcome, Adrian. And the least points was happened to be his opponent, Ben, who had 77.14. That was just super tough for him. So that gives you there. Adrian, and with that, obviously, with those two face each other, it's obviously Adrian had the best win, had the highest margin of victory of like 74 points, I believe. His margin of victory was so, or something like that. It was maybe not 70, but it was definitely somewhere in the 70s, I think. But so Adrian had the best win. The toughest loss has to be myself. I mean, when you lose by less than a hundredth of a point, I mean, what do you, how can that be any worse? Especially to your sister who only drafted even numbered players. So, but yeah, so Carrie, and with that, Carrie gets the luckiest win for the second week in a row. So congratulations, Carrie, for the second straight week. You are the luckiest winner of us all. And then with that being said, I'm going to go into the matchups just to kind of give a quick little analysis. Again, this is going to be shorter than usual, just because I went too deep into it last night and I'm not really feeling it like it, so I do apologize. But for this matchup, I predicted that I would slightly win, and I was really close. I was almost right, but unfortunately, Carrie just beat me by zero point zero 0.08 points. So, but just taking a quick look, my top performers were Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, and Derrick Henry. three guys I really rely on. For Carrie, she was really carried by T. Higgins, who had a really nice bounce back performance in week two. After that, 0 point outing in week one. James Cook, going off. The Bills' run game did really well against the Raiders this week or this past weekend. And then Hunter Henry, Carrie picked up Hunter Henry off waivers, and 2 straight weeks, Hunter Henry's been pretty good at tight end. I think he's the second most productive tight end in all of fantasy football, if I'm not mistaken, so far in the season. Um, but yeah, so Carrie barely edging one out, even with Nick Chubb getting hurt. She was able to win, and I had Miles Sanders and Jamal Williams too that were playing, but Jamal Williams ends up getting hurt as well. And of course, Miles Sanders, that last final drive of the game for the Panthers, nowhere to be found, not on the field. It bothered me so much, but congratulations, Carrie. Moving forward, though, I do just a few things to highlight for both teams. For me, I have to start trusting some of these bench guys more. Obviously Puka Nacua, he's not a one week one hit wonder. He has had two consecutive good weeks, especially against two pretty decent defenses. Especially against San Francisco when he's basically looking like what Cooper Kupp was when he was healthy without Puka Nacua. So I think I should be able to trust Puka moving forward. Do I give Jordan Love an opportunity to start instead of Tua? I think next week with the matchup, no, playing the Saints defense. But it is something to keep in mind. It's 2 straight weeks of Jordan Love getting 20 plus points. So he is starting to generate a little bit of trust for me right there. Um, and then Najee Harris, I think I'm going to give him some much needed looks now that his first two matchups of the season are gone against two tough run defenses. I think Najee Harris will see some playing time moving forward, especially since Jamal Williams is hurt and Miles Sanders has been disappointing so far. And then for Carey, with Nick Chubb hurt, it might be good for you to look into getting some help at the running back position. And then obviously, Hunter Henry, is he is he a every week starter now? Like that's something to really consider for him. So yeah, overall, good carry one. So good job there. Moving on to the next game, Adrian versus Ben. Like I predicted, Adrian, I said you'd win and you'd win easily, and I was right. So congratulations, Adrian. Daniel Jones really carried you. DeAndre Swift carried you. CeeDee Lamb, those are basically your top three performers. Pretty much everyone, except for your receivers, oddly enough, hit their projections and then some. So that kind of, that always helps, especially when you only have two players in the single digits and everyone else getting at least 13 points minimum. And then when your opponent, Ben, he only had three players get double digits and two of them were under 15. He had Christian McCaffrey, which, that's a guy who's going to be consistently good for you all season. However, AJ Brown struggled this week. Calvin Ridley, they both did great week one. It's just, and same with Travis Etienne. And it's just one of those things where, you know, it's just tough to gauge. It's one of those tough weeks for Ben, and one of those just everything worked out perfectly for Adrian. Even Adrian's bench, if you look at his bench, like he had great performers on his bench. Drake London, who had a really great game, didn't really see that one coming. Gus Edwards, he's replacing J.K. Dobbins, who Adrian initially had. So it's good on you there. Moving forward, though, I will say don't expect this too often for you, Adrian. Daniel Jones played the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are one of the, if not the worst team in the NFL, and don't expect Daniel Jones, especially with the tough schedule the Giants have coming up. Don't expect this kind of performance of Daniel Jones much more, if at all. DeAndre Swift, it's hard to gauge with him because the Eagles are very back and forth between who has a great week. Last week it was AJ Brown, which helped Ben out against my dad. And then this week AJ Brown didn't do much because it was so focused on the run game. And Devontae Smith too, he had a great game as well. But yeah, DeAndre Swift went off this week. Don't expect that level of consistent play from him. He's not a guy that's going to give you 20 plus points, half the time. You'll have his ups and downs with him for sure. And then your receivers, I mean, Stephon Diggs did okay. Obviously, he didn't hit his projection, but he did his job, and he's someone that you can rely on. Same with CeeDee Lamb. DeAndre Hopkins, though, don't have much faith in him, especially in that Titans offense. With being an aging receiver with Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback, Don't really see that being a consistent one. And then defense, we'll see how that goes. Mark Andrews is good, um, but your depth is really concerning. Other than having Drake London as a backup, as a solid backup receiver, your depth is very questionable. Deshaun Watson might be good at times to play quarterback instead of Daniel Jones, but even with that, you know, like uh, I'm not liking your depth at all. And then Ben, moving forward, you might need to reconsider quarterback. Now, I know it's only been 2 weeks. Justin Fields has not looked near like has is not shown any signs of improvement. Now, I know it's just 2 weeks into the season. He could bounce back. Um, it's just not looking good so far. There's quite a bit of drama going in the Bears front office. Justin Fields even came out with a comment today that like he thinks that coaching isn't really helping him, and he's trying to play more free, like more like himself, which was pre-coaching. So I don't know what's going on in the Bears front office or their their practice facility, but it's not something to really be excited about too much. And don't get too down, Ben, on the bad weeks that you had from ETN, Brown, and Ridley, and even like Chris Godwin too. Those guys are gonna be solid for you most of the season. It was just a really tough luck week for you, so I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. Like you have a pretty good team, and I'm not saying you are hard on yourself, but you know anything like that. And then also the Packers defense, that's one of those. They're a matchups based defense. You really only want to be playing, in my opinion, you really only want to be playing them when they're facing a team that struggles running the football because the Packers do know how to defend the pass. They for whatever reason they cannot defend the run. Joe Barry does not really scheme up good defenses against good running games. So that's just something to keep in mind moving forward. Yeah. So moving on to the next matchup of from last weekend, Joan Tennessee touchdowns versus Uncle Tom Beach Desert. I did predict that Uncle Tom would win, and I was right. For Mom, it was great to have a bounce back performance by Josh Allen. Raheem Mostert went off. That was another great performance. And then George Pickens, good play there. Those are three of your key players from this past week. They all did great. Even the Cowboys defense, second straight week of 15 plus points. They had 35 points week one, but even just getting 16 points from your defense, basically doubling their projection is still great in itself as well. So those four really carried your team. And then for Tom, you know, what can you say? He also only had two players that got less than 10 points and even two players that went under their projection. So everyone else did incredible. And one of those players who didn't get 10 points was his kicker, which most kickers don't even get 10 points anyway. So Uncle Tom's team looking really great. His Thursday night performers really put him over the top in this matchup with Devontae Smith and TJ Hawkinson. The Vikings haven't been running the ball that much so far on the season. They've been very pass heavy, especially since they don't have Dalvin Cook anymore now. That hurts Mom because she is Alexander Madison. So it hasn't been working out for her so far. Now, the Viking, as of the recording of this, the Vikings actually just traded for Cam Akers, and Cam Akers, I believe, I dropped him, I think. So he is a free agent. So if anyone out there is interested in picking him up, I can't speak today. If anyone's interested in picking him up, he's available. But yeah, for Mom, moving forward, something to really look into is your running back depth. It's Raheem Mostert's. Now, it was a great performance, don't get me wrong, but don't expect this kind of performance from Raheem Mostert often, especially in that Dolphins offense that's very pass heavy. They played a Bill Belichick defense that really knows how to defend the pass well. And so I just think that Raheem Mostert is a guy that to temper your expectations with him. Um, Darren Waller had a good week, so there's nothing really to worry about there. He had a nice bounce back performance. Don't even worry about your defense. Your receivers, it's just it sucks because if Rodgers was healthy, I feel like Garrett Wilson would have been even better. And he was good. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like he would have been even better. Like he would have taken that next step. So I just kind of feel for you there. That Zay Jones play, I know you just picked him up uh, for your guy Alan Lazard, but it is tough when you have uh, two wide receivers on the same team and neither of them are the number one option because Calvin Ridley is ahead of both of these guys, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones in the Death Star. So it's always a gamble when whoever you're picking to play. Christian Kirk is usually a little bit more reliable, especially since last year, but I mean, Zay Jones had a better week one, so I get your logic in playing him over over Christian Kirk, but it's just one of those you got to be careful. You got to be careful which one you play. Um, but yeah, but moving forward, as I said, if when Eckler's not healthy, your running game is a little in trouble. So, especially when you have a bunch of backup running backs on your roster. And now, again, I can't see if what changes have been made. So maybe these guys are already off your roster by now. Some of them probably are, but I definitely think that's something you should address as your running back depth, and also maybe even getting a different receiver too. Not necessarily like making changes, but to your starting lineup, but just maybe, Sky Moore might not be super consistent. Quentin Johnson, I was kind of high on him, but he's not really getting much playing time as of now, but we'll see how it goes. For Uncle Tom, it's crazy to think, but Kyron Williams, is he earning a starting spot right now? Because he's had two straight weeks of at least one first week one, he got 16 points. Week two, 28 against a great 49ers defense. Kyron Williams is a guy that Uncle Tom really should consider starting, especially since Montgomery got hurt last week against Seattle. You know, try to think about Kyron Williams, putting him at flex, or maybe even as one of your running backs, moving one of these guys down to flex. I know Josh Jacobs, is one of the best running backs in the league. He's only had two straight 9-point weeks, but if things continue to be stagnant for him, or if he gets even worse, Kyron Williams is a great guy to have as a running back one or two, just based on the first 2 weeks of the season. And then also, you didn't even have to play Ayuk or Watson or Thomas. These are all solid options to have moving forward as well. So I think Uncle Tom's in a great spot right now. He's got and Tyreek Hill didn't even do much this week, but just overall good job by Uncle Tom. Just consider Kyron Williams maybe being more of a starter moving forward if you really want to put yourself over the edge. And then moving on to the fourth matchup, Aunt Carol versus my dad. Um, Another tough luck loss for Aunt Carol. She really had Jalen Hurts and Rashad White do well, but other than that, the rest of the team was very lackluster. It's been disappointing for Isaiah Pacheco. I thought he'd be a lot better than he is so far. Again, it's only 2 weeks, but he hasn't been looking that great. I honestly am not sure what your logic was in picking the Houston defense over the Steelers defense, but hey, you do you. But I mean, that was something that to me that was a little bit of a no-brainer. I'm not sold too much on. I mean, Houston's also a super young team, a lot of inexperience there. That's something that they will improve on, I'm sure. The longer they have D'Amico Ryans as their head coach, but Pittsburgh was just a little bit more reliable, and they've had a lot of success recently against Cleveland. So that's just one of those. I'm not sure what your thought process was on that. So a little questionable decision making. Now, even though Evan Ingram did do slightly better than Sam Laporta, I think Laporta is a more reliable play moving forward. That's just my personal opinion. Um, but you know, hey, it worked out for you in terms of picking the right guy this week, even though it didn't really help overall. Um, and then that Nico Collins, that's a little bit of a rough one to take when it's just some random no name, not really no name, but just a lame receiver name on your roster that does significantly better. Um, Now, Jamar Chase, two straight bad weeks. It's tough to see how the Bengals offense is going to look moving forward, but um, it's, I think better days ahead for Jamar Chase. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Zay Flowers, he's not going to be consistent, especially if Mark Andrews is healthy. Zay Flowers had a great week one. There was no Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews came back. He got the bulk of the receptions on week two. Zay Flowers, now he had a fine game, but it's just something that I would be cautious. I see him more as a flex play, if anything, than a wide receiver too. So you might need to work on your wide receiver depth there a little bit, or just maybe try to initiate a trade or anything like that. But overall, though, just another tough luck week with Jamar Chase not having as good of a performance as he used to. Same thing with Joe Mixon. The Bengals are just in kind of a funk right now offensively, and then Isaiah Pacheco obviously not doing what everyone thought he'd be doing as well. So that's kind of the outlook on your team. And then for Dad, Lamar Jackson did great. Tony Pollard did great. James Conner, Debo Samuel, Michael Pittman, like you had all these guys, play really well for even Chris Olave, who hit his projection almost exactly. Um, I just think you just got really good consistent play from your entire roster. If you really look at it, you only had two players in single digits, so that's also nice to have. And it's just overall good week. I said Debo Samuel would go off against the Rams because historically he always does, and he did. So great job listening to me there. I mean, you would have played him either way, but I did predict that Dad would win, and he did. So I got that one right as well. Um, Moving forward, though, for Dad, you have an interesting dilemma at flex moving forward because Brian Robinson, he's been looking great the first couple of weeks in Washington, and even though he's technically splitting time with Antonio Gibson, the way he's been used in Washington is very similar to the way Isaiah Pacheco has been was used in Kansas City last year with Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. Now he's the offensive coordinator over at Washington. So I actually think that Brian Robinson might be a better play at flex moving forward. Now it kind of will depend on matchup because if Indianapolis plays like a really bad pass defense, then yeah, definitely, think about playing Pittman more often. I mean, and then bye weeks come into play too later in the season, so there'll be times where you'll have to play Pittman and Robinson at the same time. Don't get me wrong there, but but when it comes to that having that issue of picking one or the other, Brian Robinson, I would take a real long look at him and think about he's being used very similar to the way Pacheco was used last year. So I really like Brian Robinson's outlook on the rest of the season. And then Anthony Richardson looked pretty solid to start that game. He just got hurt. Who knows how great he would have done if he would have been playing the whole game. So I think you have a really good backup quarterback, in case something happens to Lamar or anything. And then, but yeah, overall though, rest of your team did great, and it was enough to pull out a victory. So congratulations to you, Dad. Um, and then final game of the week, Garrett versus John. Now, I predicted Garrett would win this game in a close matchup. It was a close matchup, but John ended up proving me wrong. So another straight poor performance by Joe Burrow. Now, it wasn't as poor as week one, but still under his projection. Kind of like talking about with Carroll's team. Uh, the Bengals are just in a weird offensive funk right now. They're not really doing much. And Joe Burrow even re-aggravated his calf injury, so who knows if he'll be healthy for next week. We're hoping for the best for him. We always like seeing, a competitive Joe Burrow out there. The run game, it really hurt you this week, Garrett. Especially without without Aaron Jones playing. Pierce, who should be a solid running back, moving forward, just had a bad week against the Indianapolis team, and then Jerick McKinnon, being the second running back in a group of three that get playing time. It's just he's not reliable enough, in my opinion, to play at a starting running back spot. Maybe flex from now and then, but yeah, the running game really didn't help you out. Your receivers did well. DK and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's always going to give you good weeks, so that's not really shocking there. DK, I mean, he did get hurt for a little bit, so he was out. But he did look great when he was in. So I would think that having DK on your roster really helps. And then Mike Evans, second straight week of great performance, over projection there, or overperforming the projection. So. And then also you did the thing again with the defense. You picked up a good defense at the last minute. So great pickup there. Interested to see how that works for you next week. But yeah, so you did well. I mean, you were just hurt by the running game and the quarterback play this week, to John, who had really a kind of like a weird imbalanced performance from his roster because you had four guys that did really well. You got Herbert, Bijan Robinson, Saquon, and Tyler Lockett all did well. Everyone else kind of was just meh, like okay. I mean, Waddle was fine; he had 12 points, but that's the second straight week where Jalen Waddle hasn't hit his projection. So we'll see how that goes moving forward with him. Um, but yeah, like he had his tight end didn't do well. Tyler Higbee, Josh Kelly didn't do as good as we thought. Uh, Browns did overhit their projection for defense, but you know 9 points is okay. Obviously not as good as 19 by the Bucks, um, but yeah, but John was able to those four key players really put him over the edge in this week's matchup with you, Garrett. Uh, and then just moving forward, um, John, I think Jordan Addison, it's time, especially with well, I was gonna say with Saquon being out, you probably need to find some running back play for this next week, unless you're looking to play Josh Kelly, because Alvin Kamara still has at least one more week of suspension. But I do think Jordan Addison has earned some playing time, 2 straight weeks of 16 points each. So he's someone to really think about playing at flex or maybe even receiver one if you're not going to trust Jalen Waddle, because he's been struggling the first 2 weeks of the season. But who knows? But I do think Addison has earned some well-deserved playing time in your roster. And then for Garrett, your running back depth is key. You really need and quarterback play too. Is it something where is Jared Goff gonna um, earn a starting spot at your QB spot because he's been playing better than Burrow has. Now, again, only 2 weeks, but it's just something to keep in mind. Joe Burrow's hurt. Is he going to get better? Jared Goff's been playing well. Might be worth considering starting Jared Goff and also just um, uh, helping that running back depth too will really help you moving forward, Garrett. So those were the matchups this week. Those were the outcomes. I'm trying to move over to the next panel. There we go. Um, Before I go, just want to show everyone the final standing projections after week 2. We got Uncle Tom at the number 1 spot with my dad at 2. At 3, making the huge jump, Carrie went from 9 to 3, so Carrie's all the way at 3rd. John Lopp jumped up from 8 to 4. And then at 5 is Garrett, dropped from 3 to 5. At 6, Ben jumped from 10 to 6. So good job, Ben. There, even though you lost, I think it's all about just the way your roster shaped up, and you had a really tough luck week with all your guys not doing well, and all of Adrian's guys doing great. Dropping to 7 is Adrian, even though he won. I guess the roster, it's showing that it's not going to be that consistent moving forward. My mom dropped from 5 to 8. I dropped from 7 to 9, and then Carol dropped from 4 to 10. So, yeah, Carol is trending down the most since draft day, and then Carrie, John, and Ben have increased the most in terms of their projection from draft day. So good job there. Well, that's going to be the video for today. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry this was a little bit shorter than usual, but like I said, I created one yesterday and I got all mixed up. So hopefully this one, there's no audio issues this time. I appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to watch this. And this has been the Danker Family Fantasy Football Podcast. Signing off, Paul Jensen. Have a good one, guys.